In this video, we will be talking about the Arthropoda cuticle, which is a massive three-dimensional structure cover sitting on a single layer epidermis and a basement membrane. In the previous video, we have talked about what an phylum Arthropoda is, classification of phylum Arthropoda, and we have also talked about the factor that make arthropods to be successful because we said they are the most successful phylum in the animal kingdom. And we also mentioned that the success of phylum Arthropoda is attributed to a particular class that is present there that we call the class Insecta or the class Hexapoda. Now, which means if we are talking about the Arthropoda cuticle, we will be mostly referring to the insect cuticle, which means our representative member of the phylum Arthropoda today is the class Insecta or the insects or the hexapod. Remember, we have already mentioned the reason why we call them hexapod, which is 6 leg, and we have already mentioned the reason why we call them arthropods, that is jointed appendages. So the question is, what is the Arthropoda cuticle itself? Before I move to the insect cuticle, Arthropoda cuticle is a massive three-dimensional structure cover sitting on a single layer epidermis and a basement membrane, and it has two basic regions, which is the thin external epicuticle, the thin external epicuticle, and the thick layer procuticle. So we have two regions, which is the epicuticle and the procuticle. Now you see this thick layer procuticle is now subdivided into two parts, which is the exocuticle, exocuticle, and the endocuticle. Now the exocuticle is found in the outer layer, while the endocuticle is found in the inner layer of the Arthropoda cuticle. Which means from this description, I can just quickly structure out how a arthropoda cuticle looks like. I can say we have a thin layer epicuticle. Let me use red to represent that, and a procuticle, a thick layer procuticle, and let me use blue to represent the epidermal layer because I said they sit on an epidermis or a basement membrane, right? So the epicuticle The epicuticle is this red that I use to represent, this is the epi. Let me use epi to represent that. Epicuticle, epicuticle. And this green that I have here is the procuticle. Now, this procuticle is now subdivided into what? It is subdivided into the exocuticle and the endocuticle. So in this underlying basement membrane, we now have the what? We now have the epidermal layer. So this gives me the definition that I gave the cuticle the other time. I said they are three-dimensional structure cover sitting on a single layer epidermis or the single layer basement membrane. So this is the basement membrane or the epidermal layer. So that is what we have here. Now, the arthropods, we have to understand that it is made up of exoskeleton, which they are made up of exoskeleton that does not sacrifice their motility. Now, let us go to our main slide itself. Now, I'm talking about the insects, right? I've already said the insect will be uh, our key study, right? So insect body wall is called the integument or the exoskeleton. Like I said, every arthropod have an exoskeleton, and we have the ectodermal, which is in the Oregon, and it is variously modified for rigid flexibility. It is light and it is stronger. And I already mentioned that the body wall consists of the what? The basement membrane, the epidermis, and the cuticle. So the cuticle sits on the what? Sits on the epidermis, or the basement membrane, which is the structure that I actually try to explain here. Can you see that when I'm talking about the insect cuticle, I'm referring to the arthropoda cuticle itself, because I want to use insect as our case study, as our representative member of the phylum Arthropoda. So now we now have the what? We have the cuticle that has what? That is separated into epicuticle and the procuticle, and the procuticle is separated into what? The exocuticle and the endocuticle. So we have to understand that the body wall of the insect consists of the what? Consists of the basement membrane that is found under, we call it underlying basement membrane, the epidermis, and the cuticle itself. So what we want to talk about today is the cuticle, and also we are going to talk about the removal of the exoskeleton, which is the molting, right, or ecdysis. Now let us now talk about the structure of an insect cuticle. The structure of an insect cuticle, as you can see here, this is the structure of an insect cuticle that we have already mentioned before, that we have the epicuticle or the exocuticle, and the epicuticle and the procuticle rather, the epicuticle and the procuticle. And if you can see very well, let me zoom into this very well. You will see that the epicuticle is very, very thin. Like, it's a very thin layer that we have here. That is the epicuticle. And the procuticle is very, very thick. The procuticle is very, very thick, like we have here. And everything is sitting on a what? It is sitting on a basement membrane, or the epidermal layer. Are you getting me now? Now it now has an hair-like strand that we call the what? That we call the seta, or the setae. We call it the seta, and this is how a insect cuticle looks like. Now in the basement membrane, we now have some gland, like the dermal gland. We have the trichogen cells that form the seta that we have here, and we have the tomogen cells that form the cecal sockets, where cecal is found, like where cecal is buried in. You understand? That is what tomogen cells does. So we have the dermal gland, the trichogen cell that form the seta, and the tomogen cells that form the seta pockets. Now I hope we get the structure of the insect cuticle now. Now let us talk about each part of the insect exoskeleton. The first one is the basement membrane. The basal part of the body wall formed from the degenerated epidermal cells, which means the basement membrane itself originates from the epidermal cells, and it is 0.5 micro in thickness. It consists of protein, collagen, and glycoprotein, and it forms a continuous sheet beneath the epidermis where the muscles are attached, which means they also have their own muscles. The muscles is attached in the epidermis, and it is the basement membrane that forms the what? That form the basement at which the muscles are attached. That is what the basement membrane is. The second thing is the epidermis itself. Epidermis is a continuous layer formed by a polygonal cells that is modified into cuboidal or columnar during the process of molting, which we will talk about. We'll talk about the concept of molting as well. So it is a polygonal cells that later modified into cuboidal or columnar during the process of molting. If you have studied histology, you will know what a polygonal cell is, you will know what a columnar and a cuboidal cell is. Now, adjacent epidermal cells, which is the epidermal cells that are next to each other, are held together by what we know as the desmosomes. It is the desmosome that holds the adjacent epidermal cells together, like we have here now. Look at it. These are epidermal cells. They are held together by what we know as what? As these desmosome. Now, all epidermal cells are glandular. They have gland, and they secrete cuticle and enzyme involved in the production of and digestion of the old cuticle. Now, look at this statement: the production and digestion of the old cuticle. The question is now that, is another cuticle being produced, and is the old cuticle being digested? Yes. during the process that we know as the molting or the ecdysis. The process of molting or ecdysis, a new cuticle is being produced and the old one is being digested. So it is the epidermal cell that produce or secretes an enzyme that involve in the production and the digestion of the old cuticle, production of new cuticle and digestion of the old cuticle. Now, it absorb the digestion product of the old cuticle and repair the wound because it leaves a wound. When we get to the process of molting, you will understand better. Now, we have talked about the what? The epidermis. We are still talking about the epidermis. The epidermal cell get differentiated into some region of the integument. We know what an integument is, which is the exoskeleton, and constitutes various parts of the mechano and the chemoreceptor organs. Remember, I told you that they are glandular. They are glandular, which means they consist of gland. And apart from gland, they consist of what? They consist of cells as well, because I mentioned that they consist of polygonal cells. Now, an example of gland that they consist of is the dermal gland. What does the dermal gland does? Dermal gland produce a cement layer. It secretes defensive substances and it secretes something we know as silk wax. The second thing is trichogen cells that I've already mentioned. The trichogen cell produce hair-like seta or the trichome. I showed you what a seta looks like. I said it is like hair like this. You will see it in the structure that I showed you the other time. And we have the molting gland that secretes a molting fluid. That is a fluid that they use for molting. And then we have the peristigmatic gland that is around the spiracles. So that is what an epidermal does. Now, the next thing is the cuticle, which we want to talk about itself. The cuticle is the outermost thick layer of the integument or the outermost thick layer of the exoskeleton, and it is the secretory product. You have to know that the cuticle is the secretory product of the epidermis, and it determines the surface pattern and the physiochemical properties of the integument itself, which means it is produced from the epidermis and it determines the physiochemical or physicochemical properties of the integument. Now, the cuticle is now divided into two regions like I've mentioned: the upper epicuticle, which is thin layered, and the inner procuticle, which is thick layered, which is thick. The epicuticle is thin and the procuticle is thick. And why is the procuticle thick? Is because it is subdivided into what? Subdivided into the endocuticle and the exocuticle. That is the reason why it is thicker. Now, what is now the function of the cuticle? The first function is that it provides support and shape of the insects. Provides support and shape for the insects. Muscles are attached to the cuticle. Muscles that originate from the epidermis attached to the cuticle. Invaginate to provide internal support as well, which means it provides internal support. Remember, I told you that this thing is segmented. Their appendage is segmented. So in each of these segments like this, you will see that cuticle goes inside to provide internal support for them as well. Epicuticular wax helps in the conservation of water. It helps them to in storing of water, and it helps in there's something we call cuticular sense organ. What is the cuticular sense organ? Is the seta that is in their what? That is in their cuticle, that originate from the epidermis, that is in their cuticle. It acts as something as like a mechanoreceptor, like a mechanoreceptor. If you have watched one of the video that I did on this thing on arachnid, you will see where I show the seta. You will see the seta. It acts as a mechanoreceptor. Now we have something we call the cuticular intima and the peritropic membrane that protects the epithelial membrane of the alimentary canal itself. So the cuticular intima and the peritropic membrane. If you have watched my video that I did on Trypanosoma brucei and Trypanosoma cruzi, where I was talking about the sessefly, one of the things that the sessefly penetrates in the alimentary canal of, and the Trypanosoma species penetrates in the alimentary canal of the sessefly or the Glossina species, is the peritropic membrane that lines the alimentary canal, that lines the gut wall. So it provides the epithelium, it protects the epithelial membrane of the alimentary canal. Now, the certain pigment of cuticle imparts color of the insect as well. It impacts color of the insect. So the color that the insect displays depends on the cuticular pigments. Now, what are now the cuticular components? What are the things that are present in the cuticle? The first one is that it consists of a nitrogenous polysaccharide that has 8 carbon, 13 hydrogen, 5 oxygen, and 1 nitrogen. And it is a complex, it's like complex, a polysaccharide, and it is named by Odia in 1834. Now, we have to understand that the two major components of cuticle is chitin and protein that are marked in blue. Chitin and protein, those are the two components of what? Two components of this thing. Now, the chitin is now consisting of the polysaccharide, nitrogenous polysaccharide, and it consists of N-acetyl glucosamide, which we have the structure over here. Look at the structure. This is the structure. Now, the adjacent chitin chains, which is the chains that is here, are held together by what we know as beta glycosidic linkage. The beta glycosidic linkage. And chitin is insoluble in water, insoluble in alcohol, insoluble in organic solvents, but it is soluble in concentrated mineral acid or sodium hypochlorite. So it is insoluble in alcohol, organic solvents, weak acid. It's even insoluble in weak acid as well. But you see concentrated mineral acid and sodium hypochlorite, it is soluble in them. Now, chitin is synthesized by the insect epidermis, and it has a specific gravity, which is weight over volume of 1.4. So it has a specific gravity of 1.4. That is what that's the first cuticular component. Now, the second thing is that it consists of what we know as arthropodin, sclerotin, resilin. What does an arthropodin does? It is a soft water soluble protein present in an endocuticle. It is found in the endocuticle. And the conservation of arthropodin into the sclerotin is known as sclerotization or tanning. Now, what is sclerotin? It is a tanned protein that is gotten from the what? From the arthropodin, which is amber color, and it is present only in the exocuticle. So arthropodin is found in the endocuticle, sclerotin is found in the endocuticle, and resilin is rubber-like elastic protein which is colorless and present in the joints such as wing, hinged ligaments, and leg joints. That is where we found the what? That is where we can find the resilin. That is where we can find the resilin. It's a rubber-like elastic protein. It provides them with something like flexibility. Yes, something like a flexibility. It makes them to be flexible. Now, the next thing is the epicuticle. We have talked about the component of cuticle itself. We have talked about the component of cuticle itself. Now let's talk about the epicuticle. The epicuticle consists of the cement layer, the wax layer, the polyphenol layer, and the cuticulin layer. These are the 4 layers that an epicuticle consists of. So even though it is thin, we still have 4 layers. The cement layer is very thin layer outside of most wax and consists of what we know as the mucopolysaccharide, and it protects the underlying wax and not produced by all insects. It is not all insects that have the cement layer. Now, the wax layer consists of many different compounds, but wax comprises of over 90% of the wax layer itself. It consists of many different compounds, but the main component of wax layer is wax, and it consists of long chain of hydrocarbon, of fatty acid, and alcohols. Now, it serves as waterproof layer, preventing water loss from the body. Remember, I told you that cuticle also helps in water conservation. So it is this wax layer that helps in what? In conserving water, helps them and prevent them from losing water. The next thing is the polyphenol layer. The polyphenol layer is a non-static layer consisting of various types of phenols which are mainly used for the formation of protein, and it is resistant to acid and organic solvent. Remember, I told you that the cuticle is insoluble in organic acid, insoluble in weak acid, and we know that weak acid or organic acid. So it is insoluble in organic acid, and this is because of the polyphenol layer. And we have the cuticulin layer. The cuticulin layer is amber color. just like the sclerotin that I mentioned the other time. It's amber color, thin layer over the surface of the epidermis, which is threatened by outer polyphenol layer, and it serves as permeability and also act as growth barrier. It is lipoprotein in nature. It's a lipoprotein in nature. Now that is the epicuticle. Now let us go to the procuticle, which the first structure in the procuticle is the exocuticle. The exocuticle is a thick layer which consists of mainly chitin and protein, and it is being tanned by a phenolic substance to produce a hard brown material called the sclerotin that I've mentioned before. Remember I mentioned sclerotin, which is a hard this thing, and it gives rigidity to the cuticle. It gives rigidity to the cuticle. Now, the endocuticle, I've already mentioned the exocuticle, the endocuticle. The endocuticle is the innermost and the thickest layer of the cuticle, which also contain chitin and protein as well. Since protein are not stand, this part is soft and it is flexible. Sorry, it is flexible. You understand? It is flexible. So that is the endocuticle. Now, the endoskeleton of an insect body, or the endocuticle of an insect body, now consists of what we know as the apodim and the apophysis. The apodim is the hollow invagination. Look at it. Is the hollow invagination of the body wall. It is rigid. It is ridge-like. Then we have the apophysis, which is the solid invagination of the body wall. So you can clearly see the difference between the apodim and the apophysis. Look at this one is the hollow invagination, and this one is the solid invagination of the distance. So we have the apodim and the apophysis in this particular structure that we have here. Now let's talk about the cuticular appendages. The cuticular appendages, the first priority in the cuticular appendages, we have two. We have the non-cellular cuticular appendages and the cellular parts. The non-cellular has no epidermal association but rigidly attached, and it is hair and thorns like this that I have here. And the cellular appendages is the cellular cuticular appendages is it has epidermal association, which means it's produced from the epidermis, and it is unicellular or multicellular. Now look at it. Remember I told you that the chitin, which is this, is produced from the what? From the trichogen cells, right? So we have the epidermal cells. This is the cuticle, and this is the structure of the cellular cuticular appendages that I have here. So now, remember I told you that we have the this thing. We have the cuticular appendages. The cellular one can either be unicellular or multicellular. Now let's talk about the unicellular appendages. The unicellular appendages, number one is the clothing hair, which is the seta. We have the bristle, and these unicellular appendages can be found in different insects. The clothing hair or the pulmous hair is found in the honeybee. The bristle is found in the flies. Scales is found in moths. Glandular seta is found in caterpillar. Sensory chitin is found in almost all of them. Sensory chitin is found in almost all insects. So seta is hair-like outgrowths from the epidermis. It is produced from the epidermis, and it is produced from the trichogen cells and the sockets forming cells housing trichogen is known as the tomogen. The tomogen. Now, study of arrangement of seta is known as chemotaxy. Sorry, chetotaxy. That is what we call it. The study of arrangement of seta is called the chetotaxy. Now, let's talk about the multicellular appendages. In the multicellular appendages, we have the movable one and the immovable one. The movable one is the spore, and the immovable one is the spine. Look at it. The outer spine and outer spine is absent here, and this one is the inner immovable spine, while the movable one is the what? Look at it. This is the leg of a typical insect, and one of the things that I told you about them is that what they have a jointed appendages. Look at it. This is a joint around this place. Can you see? And it is movable. This is the tibia, this is the tarsus, and this is the femur. The femur is attached to the tibia, and now we don't have the what? It can be movable. It can move up, it can move down, and this helps them in what? In movement or motility. This helps them in motility. So that is the concept. Now the next thing we want to talk about is the molting. Molting, the mechanism of periodical shedding of old cuticle and the formation of new cuticle is referred to as molting. That is what we refer to as molting. And this molting, we will go deep into it in our video to come. So this video is basically for Arthropoda Cuticle. And now in the next video, we will talk about the concept of molting or the process of molting. And I hope you have learned a lot in this particular video about Arthropoda Cuticle. Just make sure you subscribe for more content like this. Thank you.